Sport in Wales podcast.
Supported by DragonBet.
Your go-to for Welsh sports news and views.
Hello and welcome to the Sport in Wales podcast, sponsored by DragonBet and co-founded by Alex Cuthbert and Gareth Anscombe. I'm Geraint Hardy and I'm here to keep the guests in check as we look forward to the Sport in Wales week. Please remember to click follow and thanks for listening to this podcast. And this week on the pod, we're on the road and we've landed in one of my favourite places in the world, if I'm honest, the Welsh rugby home, Principality Stadium. And join us today a man who's had many special moments in the stadium, Alex Cuthbert, and the CEO of the Welsh Rugby Union, Abi Tierney. Abi, 25 years since the first game in the stadium, but also a special day because you've launched the 5-year strategy for the Welsh Rugby Union. A big day for you. How do you think it went and what have you actually announced?
Really big day. 6 months into the job and you arrive and your first job is to produce a strategy. Now that's got amazing opportunities because the conversations you need to have, you have to really understand the business and get up to speed quickly. You have really rich conversations, particularly when you're in Wales and rugby matters to everybody. But there's also then a sense when you launch it, and there's a bit of me that thought this might happen. It's almost like, oh, well, that's obvious. Because actually that's probably good because we've done a lot of engagement and there's no surprises there. But there is then a sense, I think people maybe wanted something more radical or, whereas actually what this is about is delivering goals that everybody wants to get behind and doing everything better. Does that make sense? So
totally.
I'm slightly worried there's a bit of an anticlimax for people.
Yeah, because it's fairly obvious what's been pointed out in the 5 goals you have, which means kind of we're all on the same page, if you like. Yeah. But I think maybe we've just had a press conference for context, everyone listening downstairs where you were speaking to the press, and one thing, the frustration perhaps in the room, Abi, was the fact that how are you going to implement this isn't clear yet. So what's the plan with kind of announcing the hows, if you like? Yeah,
so I think there's a difference between having a high-level strategic plan and then the operational plans and decisions you have to take to implement that. So we've already done a lot of detail. You can't share it all in a 20-minute press conference. We've done a lot of detail with the teams against each of the pillars about, okay, here are the KPIs that we're going to measure success against and phase those KPIs so that we're measuring them regularly. And then here are the actions that we understand are going to be best done to deliver those KPIs. We'll be monitoring those regularly, and if they don't work, we'll be adjusting them. I think so there's lots of operational detail there, but there is still more work to be done. So if I take the example of if you want a national team performing consistently and ranked consistently in the top 5, then we know we need to do better and we need to change things around our academies and our pathways and our development and how many non-Welsh qualified players you've got. So it's all of those things that we're getting into the real operational nitty-gritty of.
Come from my side, in terms of those pillars, which one is you're obviously going to be focused on straight away? Because you spoke about earlier about how you want to run this WRU more as a business. Yep. So in a sense that the top of the bill is probably the national team, isn't it? That's the most revenue, as you spoke about. Obviously, then you were talking about obviously under 14s aren't going into the game. So do you go for one more than the other, or is it gradually one at a time sort of thing?
No, so everything you saw today, we will be pushing on all of those fronts at the same time, and there is directors owning each individual element, so they will be working with their teams to push on all those fronts. I think maybe what has happened in the past, certainly in a lot of the engagement I've had, including actually with ex-players, is potentially we've focused on one area at the expense of the others. And so one of the reasons why we've maybe been struggling with the national team recently is that we weren't necessarily focusing on the academies and the pathways, because we were focused on the national.
Well, we were doing quite well, weren't we? That was probably the one thing, wasn't it?
So I think actually we've got to focus on all of them, and that's going to be hard. But in some ways, that's what I've said is at the heart of the strategy, almost doing 100 things really well and better, as opposed to 1 or 2 things.
How are you going to afford that then? If we're running at 50 million loss, which isn't the case now, so if you can explain a little bit of how you can reduce them running costs, but then also there's still £24 million debt currently. So how are we going to afford it? Because if I was looking at it from, I run a business, not to this scale obviously, but investment is always something. How are we going to actually do that? We want to achieve that. These are our aims, but how financially can you achieve it?
So there's 2 answers to that. Firstly, a lot of things that we need to do is about doing something differently or better, actually not costing more money. So that's number one. And then the second bit of it is actually we've already got now, I mean, it's a really sound financial business underpinning it all. So we've got £100 million to turnover. Up till now, we've had the CVC money, which we talked downstairs, that has been coming in, that has masked the fact that we've been overspending. We've already identified ways we're going to bring that back in. And once we've done that, even our leverage against the debt is reasonable. So we've actually got a really sound business. And then you start to have a national team that's performing and you have regional teams that are performing. You know what? You start to get more money from sponsors. You start to be able to, you know, sell out the stadium. You get people going back to the regional teams. So you end up in that virtuous circle. So that's hopefully some ideas.
So, you know, obviously, sadly, the way it can be with the press, you know, the £15 million loss will be a headline. The £24 million debt will be probably a headline, which, you know, people will...
It's about 20 million debt.
Okay, sorry. We'll grab on that. Don't want to add 4 to your bill.
But then you have to see it in a bigger context.
Yeah, totally. So you when you look at it, you kind of think quite positive about the situation.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I said, somebody asked downstairs, didn't they, what are the 2 words you'd use to describe the current financial position? And I said, understood, number 1, which is really important, because you can only fix it when you really, truly understand it. And number 2, opportunities. Actually, everywhere I look at our finance, if I was coming into a business that was already maxing all of its opportunities and had all the processes and systems in place, then I'd be far more worried. Actually, there's lots of opportunities. We've got to improve margin, to improve revenue, to do things better and differently. So yeah, no, I'm genuinely optimistic.
Yeah, it's good. The regions is one that obviously everyone's going to be asking about till there's a solid answer on it, I suppose. Yeah. How is this plan currently going to benefit the 4 regions that we have?
Okay, so they've been heavily involved in the plan. I just want to shout out to all of my equivalents in the regions because they've done a huge amount of time and effort, and we've had lots of, and with Warren as well, lots of repeat time in rooms, looking at the data. And what we have done so far is a plan that says we have all agreed we need our regions to be performing at the top level in the competitions that they're in. So that is a goal that we've all agreed to. We've then said in order to do that, this is what we need to do. We have benchmarked with other tier 1 nations and particularly the ones that we compete with in the URC, but also things like the PRL, what do we need to be competitive? And we've looked at everything from squad size, makeup of the squads. So I mentioned how many, non-Welsh qualified players vis-a-vis Welsh qualified players, what kind of depth you need. Warren's done some great work looking at the depth he had when he was first in Wales and the depth he's got now, particularly in certain positions. I'm using it as an example of the level of detail. And then we've also looked at, therefore, what facilities are needed. Now, some regions have Scarlets have an indoor training facility, others don't. So we've benchmarked all of that, and we have identified that in order to have 4 regions competing at the top levels in their competition, we need to invest more money. I don't think that will come as a surprise to anybody. And therefore, the plan now, over the summer months, and we've got a subcommittee of the board driving this along with the Professional Rugby Board, is to look at how do we close that financial gap. So if we know we need to invest more, what are the opportunities? Can we increase our income? Can we look at refinancing our debt? Because our debt is currently very punitive, both in terms of interest rate and payment terms. Could we look at doing something different with our balance sheet? Because we have some really good assets. And could the regions look at ways of increasing their revenue as well? So we're looking at all different elements. We're not leaving any stone unturned. And then we'll see if we can close the gap, then we can look at how we're going to do that investment. If we can't close the gap, then come September, we'll be bringing proposals for what we'll do as an alternative.
Okay, does that affect the size of the regions then, possibly in September?
Possibly, but that's only an if, and there's lots of different ways that you could do it. And I know, people have heard Nigel Walker talk about it. I know Lance Bradley more recently from the Ospreys has talked about it. So, you could reduce your number of regions, or you could pay them at different amounts, invest different levels. So there's lots of different options. But I don't want... I really want people to hear what's so important is that is like the last resort at the moment, because actually, really importantly, the ideal number getting the best, most successful national team is 4 regions for the number of players that are coming through. So if we actually are...
Is that based on the amount of players we have, or is it the quality of players?
Both.
Right, because I'm saying at the moment we're probably not... Our quality is probably not as high as the last 10 years.
Yes.
So then you could argue then we should have less teams.
But even if you had high quality, we've done the analysis that shows that 4 would be the ideal. Right. You could manage with less, but it wouldn't be the ideal number in terms of depth across every position, etc.
Would a thought come in process in terms of maybe dropping down to 3 to increase sort of budgets, which then we'll be able to sort out facilities, depth of squad, competitiveness, and then once the programme, I guess, once you're competitive club level, we're going to be obviously way more competitive international level, which then brings more revenue in. Then you go back to 4, or is it always going to be 4 is the main priority?
We haven't made the decision yet.
Right, okay.
So, and I think there's so many different options.
Yeah, okay.
But what I don't, it's almost like, if for me, it's about being laser focused on saying, what can we do to make 4 work?
Yeah.
Because as soon as you start thinking about plan B and plan C, you almost take your focus off of thinking. So at the moment, let's do our best to make the 4 work.
So September seems like really soon.
Yeah, it is.
But in September, will we have an answer one way or the other on the future of the regions?
Yeah, that is our aim. And then, but you know, I don't want a hostage to fortune. That if something comes along that kind of means we need more time, we'll take more time, but we'll keep people posted on that. But the aim is to take a proposal to board in September. And then communications would come following that.
And how's the relationship been with the regions, would you say?
Really positive. Really, they have been so constructive, collaborative, around the table with us, right level of challenging, making, really kind of... But I think it's been a real reset in the relationship. And I hope they would say the same. We're really transparent. We've done it together. I'm not saying there haven't been bumps in the road, and there won't be bumps in the road if and when we need to make difficult decisions. But I certainly think we are on our journey to kind of rebuilding trust and for it to feel much more collaborative. And an example of that, which I talked about downstairs, is this agreement to deliver some of our services together in a much more joined-up way. So that's everything from looking at how we can be much more joined up from a rugby perspective, but also we are going to be recruiting a chief growth officer, and that's going to be a joint appointment across the WRU and the 4 regions, looking at how we can work much more closely together to generate revenue and grow our income stream. And that's never happened before, and I think that would be a really good indicator to me that the relationships, still more to be done, but the relationships are in a better place.
Yeah, Alex touched on it earlier. If the men's senior team are doing well, obviously that's the spotlight, the world spotlight's on that team. Getting income streams, investment in sponsorship is much easier for you guys.
It is. Absolutely.
So how do we whose accountability is that to kind of help that plan happen in the short term? Because we've got a young squad at the moment. There's not many senior players in there to kind of set an example and lead away. So is the accountability there with yourself, or does it fall to Warren?
It's absolutely a shared accountability. And I would say it's my accountability, it's our board's accountability, it's Warren's accountability, and it's Nigel Walker as well as the overall executive director for rugby. So, and that's not meant to me having slopey shoulders on it. It's just when something is so critical and it is, is your core product, then you're going to have a number of different people that are doing their best to support Warren and the team to deliver the best possible plan. And we've got a plan. He's delivering against it with his team. We're monitoring progress. We're constantly having conversations. Is there something else you need? Do we need to do things differently? So, yeah.
Yeah, because I guess if you say sort of being devil's advocate in terms of, say, if we don't probably get the tour that we're hoping, obviously short term, we're going to have to probably be a bit of a loss in terms of first, because obviously it's a 5-year plan, isn't it? We're not expecting it to hit the ground running come September. Are we obviously going to have to go for a little bit of hurt, maybe longer, sacrifice maybe the autumn Six Nations? We're probably not going to get results that we want that quickly, are we? So, but then that's going to start affecting, I guess, business side of it in terms of revenue. Is there a plan in terms of if we do get to that sort of scenario?
Yeah, no, I mean...
Obviously, I don't want to be too negative
at the moment,
on it.
Yeah, and it goes back a bit to the answer I gave on the regions and what's your plan B, what's your plan C. At the moment, we've got a plan and we're delivering against it. And I think, I was there at Twickenham on Saturday. We saw some real promise and real guts from the players that were playing, and, but it was... under-strength teams, the PRL commitments, etc. So let's see how we do in Australia. If we need to adjust course and think about, what's happening, then we'll do that. But what I don't want to do is kind of go, think, what happens if this happens? What I would want to see, genuinely want to see, and what I think people should be holding me to account to, is that we are progressing.
Yeah, that's
and that we're not going to suddenly go and get a Grand Slam. Oh, amazing, but but
it's pretty good.
Are we going to not be sixth in next year? That would be the kind of progress I'd be looking to see.
Would they be Would there be a meeting after summer? Obviously autumn, and it'd be quite regular.
We do, and I mean after the Six Nations, we had a really in-depth review with Warren and with Johan from a women's perspective, looking at what worked, what didn't work. What do we need to do differently, and it will happen after every chunk, and let's see if we need to adjust.
We've seen it just across the road in Cardiff City Stadium, the way the FAW have turned things around in terms of, if you go back to my youth, there was 3,000 people watching Wales play. That gives you positivity, I'd imagine. But have you spoken to them and seen how they can turn it around?
So, Alice Carlton, who's their chair, actually was one of the first people reach out to me when I got this job. And actually at quite a few levels in our teams, we've been speaking to them about learning about what they've done. We've been looking at what they've done about really embracing the Welsh language and the Welsh culture as well, because I think that's really kind of captured the imaginations of the younger fans. So we're absolutely learning from them, and also looking at what they're doing at the grassroots and the community too. So all levels. It's really impressive. One of the things as well is, I was with the senior men's squad yesterday, and before they were leaving for Australia, just thinking about the kind of the Gareth Bale impact and things. You're talking about, they haven't necessarily got some of the maybe more visible senior men in the squad at the moment. So here are going to be our heroes of tomorrow, and how are we going to help support and build them up and things. So we're looking at all different angles. And
did you denounce the plan to the players yesterday?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, and what was the feedback from them?
Couldn't get out of the room. I mean, they were so engaged. It was brilliant. They had so many questions. They particularly care passionately about the regions, because a lot of them work in the regions. They want to know when they're going to get certainty on that, which is really understandable. So there's questions on the regions. There was questions on the 25 cap rule. There was questions on, future contracts. There was questions on, actually what was really good part of the conversation as well was, not just about investment in players in the regions, but also, actually it's about the facilities, it's about the support teams that are around them, it's about the coaches, it's about all of that actually, and a couple of the players, talked about that, who aren't in Wales at the moment, what would bring them back. So it was a really engaged...
Honest conversation.
I hope they valued it, and we've just got to keep those conversations going. I certainly found it really helpful.
And senior pros that have maybe left the camp in the last few years, Alex could be one of them, and others who have retired as well. Have they fed into this, and what level have they fed into it?
So we had a company called Portus help us do a lot of the benchmarking, a lot of the work. So we had some ex-senior players were interviewed by them, and then we tested some of the ideas as they were emerging with them. And particularly, actually, what was interesting is what's changed over the last 10 years. What are some of the things we might have lost that we need to think about reinvesting in? And some of that connection, particularly between community, regional clubs, and the national team, where I think some of those, almost the sinews that tie it all together, the glue, has maybe kind of come away a bit. I don't know if that's your thinking, Alex.
I was going to ask a question in terms of...
I was asking you a question.
Well, you asked me, obviously, we spoke to John Sadler in terms of maybe getting, obviously, ex-players maybe in more in terms of environment, in terms of like how it was, 10... Obviously, in the period where we did quite well, is that a sort of thing that you'd be maybe leaning towards?
Yeah, no, and we've got Jamie Roberts on our board,
obviously he's on the board.
And so he has been and he's also on the professional rugby board as well. So in all of the conversations we've been having, he's got that history and that memory as well. But there's no I wouldn't say got a plan here that we're going to set some kind of panel up or whatever, but I mean, it was great that Canones was down in the press conference. He's one of the people who's been really generous with his thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, because we all want the same thing, don't we, at the end of the day? So it's just, obviously, everyone has their opinion. And in Wales, we're probably not the most patient. That's the worry. That's what I'm probably trying to
There's two things. The passion is brilliant, isn't it?
Oh, it's undeniable, isn't it? But
it then can,
exactly.
That patience,
expectation,
frustration as well. Expectation, frustration, because people care, and I'd much rather have that with some frustration and expectation than not have it. But I think the other bit is just trying to get two Welsh people that agree. would be also quite handy.
All the best.
Well, we can all agree that we want the best for Wales.
Yeah, we do. We absolutely do. But it's been so challenging actually doing the strategy because, and also you find that some people have such kind of particular interest in a particular very niche area, and they won't let it go. But yeah, no, that's...
Well, just on that quickly as our last question, because I know we've got a dash. Well, not a niche area, but it's one that kind of I hear fans talk about a lot, and it's the budget per squad.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? So we all want to be competitive, and it's the, well, how are we going to be competitive if we've got 4.5 mil for a squad? So, there's talk about what that magic number is. It's around 6 to 6.5 to be competitive. Would you agree that is the figure that you guys need to aim for?
That's the benchmark that we've analysed and that we have come up with.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you bridge that gap then?
So that's the work we're doing over the next couple of months, is how we bridge that gap and what we do to do that.
Yeah.
We have agreed the budget for next year, so it's for the... So and that's where that patience comes in. And I just want to say next year is going to be tough because we haven't got that ability to bridge that gap now. But one of the reasons why I think it's so important we make a decision in September is that is ahead of contracts being signed for the following year.
Because for fans' clarity, if there was a drastic change in regions, you're obliged to give a region notice period.
2 years notice period, yes. There's not going to be anything that happens overnight. And that's really important for people's jobs, people's security as well. That there will be a transition period, etc. One of the things you see, and it's so sad when you see it, isn't it, in the PRL with some of the clubs that have gone, they just overnight, they just go. And that's, I am determined for that not to happen if we can absolutely do our best.
And there are still people bitter about the Crusaders back however years it was. So do you know what I mean? So it's important to manage that if it happens.
Yeah, that's the other thing about Wales, it's history.
Yeah. But
we're all amateur anthropologists here, I think, in our tribe.
But positivity from your end, you're excited for this next journey.
This job, and Richard joked, but it's honestly true. Every day I get up feeling lucky to do this job, even on really tough days, and I have had some more tough days. I said, I think my honeymoon period's definitely over. It feels like an absolute dream job and a privilege because it matters to so many people. I just don't want to let people down, and I absolutely believe that if we could unite behind One Wales and this strategy, we could deliver something incredibly inspirational and game-changing for the rugby in Wales over the next 5 years. And
to finish on a high, 25 years of the stadium, what's been your personal favourite memory of being in this stadium? Personal favourite memory?
That's such a hard question. So I said downstairs, I was here for the first game 25 years ago. That was pretty incredible. You know what? I don't know whether I've told this story actually. So my Auntie Liz, who passed away a couple of years ago, and you'd probably recognise her if you saw a picture, Alex, because she was a massive, massive Welsh rugby fan, and she had cerebral palsy, and so was wheelchair bound. But she used to come to every home game that she possibly could, and she used to, because where the disabled seats are, be right on the halfway line, and she was such character. And we all she didn't have any children, but she had lots of nieces and nephews. So we'd all grab to kind of to be with her on the home game. But I saw, a Grand Slam win with my Auntie Liz. That was, so that was probably one of the most special memories. And if she could see me today, she'd be like, high five. So that's probably up there. But then I've been to the concerts this time and watching Taylor Swift speak Welsh on that stage. There's those really incredible moments as well. So it's been amazing.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We do wish you well.
Thank you. Thanks for your support.
We all do well, right?
Yeah, so, absolutely. No, thank you.
No, thank you so much, Abby.
Oh no, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. So there we have it, Abby Tierney. She's always quite honest, I think. Al, what's your thoughts generally about what she had to say there?
Yeah, I think she has. She's obviously pretty new. She's new to the job, really, isn't she? And I think she's come in and realised how much of a bit of a mess it is, to be honest, in terms of the finances and how they go about that. I think, obviously, they spoke downstairs, didn't they, about how much they're changing, and they sort of know how to maybe maximise the most out of their assets, i.e. the stadium, and go forth. I think the first couple of years are going to be tough. Next year is going to be really tough. And then obviously I think they're going to have to make a decision whether 4 regions is the way forward as a business.
Yeah.
I really think that's going to be one of the big talking points come September, whether they can bridge that gap, because obviously the only way they can bridge that gap is probably taken away from the regions or somewhere else in the union. So some big decisions there.
Yeah, she mentioned downstairs, for context for everyone listening, that they've tightened up by 4.5 million already. They found that they were wasting money there. There was some staggering things in terms of there was no profit and loss on the sheets when she turned up, which is unbelievable to think of the size of this organisation. But do you think, or do you agree with this, that she has to take her heart out of this? And I think a lot of people working in W take their hearts out because they have to treat it like a business and look at it as facts and figures and not, oh, well, I really like this region or this region.
100%. It's a business, isn't it, in the day? And you look at the best asset this business has is the senior men's team, senior men's and women's team. They're the ones that's where the money comes from. You know, the Six Nations, the Autumns, the stadium, full house. They said nearly makes them 10 million a game.
Yeah.
So that, like in my eyes, that has to be the main focus. And then obviously then at the bottom of their pyramid that they have is obviously the youngsters coming through, the love of the game. Like if they get that right and the middle sort of take care of itself. But like you said, I think they're going to have to there's going to be some tough decisions, I think, come September time in terms of trying to bridge that gap and whether 3 regions is the best way forward. But like I said, it's really, I'm glad I'm not, at the top making decisions because it's going to be tough. Because
let's be honest, it's great that we have September as some kind of deadline for everybody to aim towards now. But she said she's not going to be held accountable to account on that date. So if it changes for whatever reason, she's happy to change it. There would be a winding down period of 2 years if it was going to change.
That's where the detail is, isn't it? That's what we were probably hoping for today.
Yeah, totally.
That is where everyone's going to understand how are they going to do this? How are they going to somehow put more money within the regions? I think they spoke about 35 million over 5 years. For me, that doesn't quite add up in terms of wanting to be 6.5 and competitive. So, yeah, we'll go from there. Yeah, because the maths is 6 million times 3 is 18 million, right? And they're spending 18 million at the moment on the regions. So that, when you think of it in that way, that's scary, isn't it? To think we have to drop a region if that's the case. And obviously then they were in a deficit of 15 million a year, weren't they? So... yeah, but obviously, like she said, she spoke about how they can offset a lot of their debt because it's pretty low compared to the interest. So, there's money there as well. So I think they do have the money there. It's just whether, I guess, they trust the regions enough to what they need to do with it. What's one thing that, I can't quite see how they're going to make it work is the coaches side of it. Because I know you're crying out for, better coaches. You've been in the game. How do they go about that, in your opinion? Well, I think it's just more investment in it. We've got a lot of good young coaches, but I feel like there's not probably enough time put into them in terms of creating, a lot of them have just played in Wales and coached in Wales. And I think, we've had likes of Mark Jones who've gone away to Crusaders. He's done Worcester. He's come back and he's a top-class coach and he's made a real difference at the Ospreys. Don't think we have enough of those coaches coming through. A lot of them have stayed in Wales and coached in Wales. And you can get quite narrow, sort of short-sighted in terms of how you want to play the game. And I think we have sort of sat on our laurels in terms of the youngsters, I guess, over the last 10 years. We don't have enough quality coming through at the moment. We've got a lot of youngsters, but they're not at the level that we want them to be at. I think that's where the national team are probably sort of faltering at the moment. Yeah, and she offered to you there. You can still feed your opinions into her. You're going to be doing that? I will, yeah. If she asks them, I'll give them. But... there's obviously a lot of people involved. I think the more people are on this, we need to all be on the same page. And I think that's probably the biggest issue the last, 30 years, that regions aren't on the same page as the union. The union don't trust the regions don't trust the unions. And then we're all in different directions, where if you look at other countries, you've got Ireland, they seem to all be on the same page. France, England, they all seem to, I know English teams are going, but they all seem to be in the right direction in terms of relationships from the regions coaches to the national. Yeah, roll on September, I think. Yeah, look forward to that. Yeah. Kathy, thanks as always, mate. You got a golf course to get to or something like that, right? Cool, mate. Playing a lot of golf at the moment, Alex Cuthbert. Thanks for your company, mate, and thanks to Abby Turney as well for joining in with us today. And thanks to you for listening as well. You can catch us on our socials. Just search Sport in Wales and tell your friends about us and share the love. And we'll catch you next week, wherever you go, wherever you are. Enjoy your Sport in Wales week.
Sport in Wales podcast.
Supported by DragonBet.
Your go-to for Welsh sports news and views.